Sure. Deputy Holly Kearns.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Minister. It's important, I think, that we have made the time to discuss this really important matter and that the Minister is here to elaborate on the State's response. And unfortunately, it does happen in the context of small groups of people intentionally spreading fear and discord focused on the East Wall. And I think it's just maybe important to highlight that those far-right agitators kind of spouting hate and misinformation are always looking for those opportunities. And I think Lynn highlighted really well how sometimes we can fall prey to those lies and prejudices, but just important to call it out. And I know that these groups don't represent the vast majority of people in Ireland or the East Wall communities. And yeah, I think also important to highlight that it's to be supportive of people being angry at, situations with housing and waiting lists and all of those things are one thing, but that we need to condemn in the strongest term anyone who blames refugees or asylum seekers for any of our problems. And if people want to protest, I think come to Leinster House and express your opinions and decision makers instead of intimating those who have come to the state seeking safety. Minister, I think we all acknowledge that the Ukrainian crisis has been really sudden and unprecedented, and it's brought nearly 50,000 displaced people into Ireland, and that has in essence been left for your department to deal with, for you and your officials. And I think from the outside looking anyway, that seems like there should be more hands on deck, and I'm just interested to know from all of you if you think that more departments need to be kind of more engaged on this issue. One thing you were saying there in your opening statements around if you lose existing accommodation, how significant that is, and you said that without hotels, we would have to stop taking people in March. And I'm just wondering, when we get into the tourist season, is there kind of plans in place for that particular time when presumably a lot of hotels will want to go back to that kind of business? I'm just wondering what the feeling is in the department in relation to that. And last month, the Refugee Council report on the accommodation crisis provided a comprehensive analysis and recommendations on many of the issues that we're discussing. And they point out that vulnerable people, including children, are being put in centres that are unfit for purpose. So I'm just wondering what measures are being put in place to address the kind of health and safety and child protection risks. They called for the appointment of an inspector of emergency transit and tent accommodation. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. And the Irish Refugee Council highlighted the need for a refugee response director and a supporting communications plan to convey and oversee logistics, coordinate action across government departments and provide clear communication with the public. And I think there's a really glaring need for such a plan, especially concerning the situation in East Wall at the moment. I think many issues could probably be avoided with timely communication. I agree with Lynn that that's not consultation, but communication. And you cited an extensive leaflet drop, but presumably that's not the only kind of thing that you're looking at. I'm just wondering, what is the leaflet drop or what's on the leaflets? And if I have time, I'll come back in maybe with questions then. Thank you.
Thanks. Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Deputy Kearns. And just to say, I suppose, first of all, I agree with your initial comments in terms of our approach to and the misuse of concerns by certain nefarious groups, and we're aware of that. In terms of the assistance from other departments, and particularly in terms of the move to a kind of a longer-term accommodation approach, we're working closely with the Department of Housing. The Department of Housing, through the local authorities, will be, I suppose, taking the lead action in terms of the new vacant homes call that will be coming out at the end of this month. As you know, we would have been involved with Irish Red Cross in terms of the first pledge process, which, despite the legitimate criticisms of it, has resulted in 5,500 people being accommodated, and I think that is really significant. But this new call is going to be led through local authorities and overseen by the Department of Housing, and that's an important support. Likewise, the refurbishment of, I suppose, large-scale residential or institutional buildings, that's been led through the Department of Housing, and that I hope to see start to deliver significant number of beds early in the new year. And those measures, along with the delivery of modular housing, they're going to be important in terms of where hotels do decide to move and say they want to return to tourism for the summer season. So those are measures we're taking, and I know the Taoiseach has certainly spoken of maybe increasing our modular output, but we don't have absolute line of sight on everything coming into the spring. We may well look to the third level sector again. They provided huge support this year, and there may well be requests going in there as we go into next summer. But again, there will continue to be a pressure on this area. In terms of some of the points, I engage regularly with the Irish Refugee Council and a range of other NGOs. I think just you referenced and rightly referenced tented accommodation. We are now looking to end the use of tented accommodation. Indeed, some of the people who are living in East Wall were former residents of tented accommodation in Athlone, and that's important. There's 310 in total living in tented accommodation. We're going to cease that use. In terms of particularly children and unaccompanied minors who are arriving in the state, the Irish Refugee Council did raise concerns with us, particularly in terms of the identification of age and the correct age to determine if someone was a minor or was over the age of 18. So we've brought forward a new protocol. TUSLA, working with my department and the International Protection Office, have proposed a new protocol to the various NGOs, and I understand they certainly see that as a significant improvement to ensure there's, I suppose, external oversight of a decision by a TUSLA social worker that someone is over, or is over 18 and isn't qualified as a minor. In terms of, I suppose, the idea of a director, I suppose I through what I see of how government operates at the moment, I'm not clear how one person forces a whole range of maybe force is the wrong term, but kind of compels an agenda on a range of departments. That's primarily the way I see it. That's done by the Taoiseach, and that oversight takes place within the Cabinet Subcommittee. And I definitely think the coordination of government response has improved very significantly since the Cabinet Subcommittee came into being. And one of the decisions taken at the last Cabinet Subcommittee was to ask all government departments to start making planning, particularly for the resource impacts of the Ukraine crisis on them. So I think we are, and I think it's important we do, moving from that reactive point to a more medium to longer term planning element, and all government departments have been asked to do that piece of work. Can I
just ask one more question? Is that okay? Thanks, Minister. And there's an incredible scope, I think, to utilise the skill set and determination of refugees and asylum seekers to address not just integration, but also staffing shortages in different settings, from healthcare to construction to loads of different things. And one of the strengths of the Ukrainian programme is ability to work, and many of them have quickly started contributing to local economies in that sense. I'm just wondering, what measures are you taking to identify professionals and enable them to begin work? Or is there, it might not be at that stage yet, I'm just wondering if it is. Because many of them I know want to, and it would include like an accelerated process to recognise qualifications maybe, and an easing restrictions for non-EEA citizens to work. And just too often the barriers seem bureaucratic rather than practical. And then NGOs in the area of asylum and refugee support have expressed concern around the emergence of a two-tiered system, and the response for Ukrainians has shown that it is possible to allow people fleeing violence to take up work immediately, to be issued with PPSN numbers, that kind of thing. And so while those in direct provision are waiting months for the temporary residence certificate and have highly restrictive working permissions, will the changes, do you think, be afforded to them now that we've seen it kind of in practice? Do you think that will happen? And just a final question is, I mean, maybe we don't know at this stage, but what is the impact of everything that's going on in the white paper to end direct provision? I know it's something that you feel strongly about, and that this was an unprecedented situation. The original date was 2024, and it's understandable that it was impacted, but what date are you now working towards, do you think, to end the system?
Thanks, Deputy. Well, we estimate about 11,000 Ukrainians are now working across the country, and so that's a significant addition to the workforce. There are supports for them in terms of English language supports from through the ETBs across the country. I'll be honest, I can't speak more specifically to maybe the employment activation provisions. I think that's probably more a matter for social protection or Minister Harris's, but I know there are provisions there. I just can't speak in huge detail to them. In terms of international protection applicants, as you know, that was reduced from 9 months to 6 months. People can work within 6 months of arriving in the country, and we did reduce the number of restrictions on their ability, on the types of work that can be taken up. That isn't being re-examined at the moment. I do think, you know, we are, and maybe to answer your third question in terms of the white paper had 3 key elements: accommodation, integration and supports. And obviously the impact of the war and the impact of the increased numbers is impacting on the accommodation element, but we're looking to bring forward some of those other elements. So integration officers was kind of, you know, a medium-term part of the white paper originally. Now we're hoping to see them rolled out around the country this year, and we actually have the funding for them. We're looking at things like, I suppose, looking at translation services to support international protection applicants, looking at better English language supports. So we are looking to make it easier, looking to put in place more support so international protection applicants, while they are here, have a better chance of integrating. And I recognise that, you know, in terms of access to employment, yes, there is a difference. The Temporary Protection Directive coming from EU law says immediate international protection is within 6 months. But I still think, in terms of, I suppose, giving people you know, some chance to settle in the country, I think 6 months is, you know, it's significantly improved to the approach in the past. And across that 6 months period, we are putting in place better integration measures and better supports to, I suppose, empower international protection applicants once that 6 month period has passed to be, you know, part of the labour market if they so choose.
Okay, thanks, Deputy. Deputy Mark Ward.